The entertainment industry depends on new voices with new ideas to deliver content, but writing that breakthrough script that gets you noticed in Hollywood is never as easy as it looks. Founder and CEO of Ibis Communications, MaryAnne Howland, will sit with former television executive turned writer Kelly Edwards to share invaluable insights from the gatekeeper's POV to finding the one idea that will set you apart from the rest. Really excited for this conversation. Everyone, please help me welcome, for writing your breakthrough script, the one and only MaryAnne Howland.
Thank you, Dana. And thank you, DMA, for that wonderful perspective of the work that we've been doing for so many years. I remember being there from the very beginning with you guys. And good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone, wherever you may be watching from across the diaspora. I'm joined here with the brand newly minted author, Kelly Edwards. Kelly is a veteran producer and creative executive who has worked with every major studio in Hollywood. She was mentored by legendary director Gary Marshall at Disney and famed producer Laura Ziskin at Sony. And Edwards eventually shifted her focus to television, where she served as a comedy executive at Fox and headed up UPN's comedy division. After producing a drama series for Paramount, she moved on to NBC Universal, where she oversaw diversity for their 20 networks. Kelly spent her final stint as an executive creating HBO and Warner Media Entertainment's Emerging Artists programs. And along the way, she also produced a Christmas movie for Hallmark, as if she wasn't busy enough already. Kelly holds a BA in theater from Vassar and an MFA in screenwriting from Emerson College. She's been a Sundance Episodic Lab Fellow and was recently staffed on the new Fox drama, Our Kind of People. And her new book is The Executive Chair, a writer's guide to TV series development, which will be released soon. I think it's October 5th, somewhere soon.
October 5th, yeah.
I've had a chance to read it, and it's really straightforward. It's very easy to read, filled with insider tips, and as Dana said, dropping gems that Kelly has gained from her illustrious career in the entertainment industry. And I'm so excited to see you again, Miss Kelly. We met 8 years ago at the Hollywood Creative Forum. I still have notes from that interview.
It's been that long.
And you were VP of Talent Development at HBO in a diversity role then. So
that's right.
Let's start with talking about, the journey that you've been on from your point of view as an executive who's had a history and an experience in so many different roles that give you this 360-degree view of what the business is. Can you talk about those roles and how they brought you to your arrival of here today? What's going on with you now?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me just say thank you to the Hollywood Creative Forum for inviting me back, because I have been here many, many, many times as an executive on those panels, and to be coming back sort of on the other side of it on the creative side has been just an amazing transformation for me. And I also am really excited that you're giving away some books. So I cannot wait for people to read it. I hope it is of value to them. This journey is very much a 360 in a lot of ways, because I actually started when I got out of college as a casting assistant. I actually worked for a manager, then a casting assistant. I was a casting assistant, and then I was a writer's assistant. So I've sort of made this gigantic loop back into one of the first goals that I had, which was to write for television. And along the way, I found myself taking some really interesting paths to get there. So I did, and you sort of gave my bio already, but what it sort of brought me to was I was looking for, really who was making the decisions about what the content that was being made, who was making those decisions. And so I sort of followed this interesting path of following the writers and following the content itself. So after being a writer's assistant, I was able to move into features, and I had got my first job working for as a story editor, working for Laura Ziskin and for Gary Marshall. I was also reading scripts for New Line, so I was developing my ability to assess material. I moved on to working in television, and so I got that piece of it as well, which was really beneficial because I've worked my whole career now on the TV side. So I feel like I learned how to put together a show, what those components were, how to work with talent, all the things that you sort of need in order to really be an effective executive. And then I was able to run my own division and then make some decisions about the kind of material that I was going to bring in. And then I wanted to learn how to produce, and I felt like that was going to give me career longevity because there's only so many years that you can go as an executive on the buying side before somebody eventually fires you. There's always a buyout or something that sort of makes your career take a left turn. So I really wanted to make sure that I had some other tools in my toolkit, and producing was a great way for me to learn how to sell, which was incredibly important, and I use those tools today. And then going to NBC, I really worked on it was sort of giving me another vantage point, which was I was really working side by side with HR. I was learning about the recruiting side of things. In addition to that, I was working in a corporate environment, so my job was really much more functional, but I also had to stretch myself, which meant I was giving more big picture brainstorming workouts. I was doing working with a lot of the ERGs and the affinity groups. I was giving very big speeches and moderating panels. And so I had to learn how to build those skills that I never really had before. And it gave me, I think, a comfort in a lot of areas that I didn't have prior. And then going back into the working for HBO, I was able to sort of get back into working with those artists in emerging artist programs. And I love that. And that sort of led me to finally exposing the work that I'd been doing for the last 30 years on my own, which was I had always been writing, and I had always been taking classes, either at the Groundlings or improv or writing classes. And my goal had been to make sure that I was up on how to speak to writers. But in the meantime, I also developed myself as a writer. So when I was at HBO, I decided, well, let me go back and get my graduate degree, which I did. And along the way, while I was doing that, they always encourage you to apply to competitions. And so I applied to a couple of competitions, and I applied to Sundance and got in. And let me tell you, that moment that I got in, and they said, oh, we're gonna do a press release, and I had a nervous breakdown because I thought, oh no, now everyone's gonna know my secret, and everyone's gonna know my passion is actually writing, and is that a conflict? And I was a little worried about that. But ultimately, everybody that I spoke to said, you can still help people get to the next level in their writing. You're just gonna probably do it from a different vantage point. So that was sort of the whole Megillah on how I ended up here. It's been a crazy ride. I was approached right after I got my deal at HBO, maybe a week after I physically left HBO as an executive, by a publishing company that asked me to write a book. And my first reaction was, well, there've got to be thousands of books about this topic in the way that I'm going to talk about it. And they said, no, there's actually nothing about it, development from the executive point of view. So we want to crack open, what do you guys think? And how do you think? And can you give us some insider tips? And so that's the book that I wrote.
And so, and I told you should be careful when you tell that story, because when a writer hears, oh, you got a book deal, just like that, and you know how hard it is, how many people struggle trying to get that first book deal, and somebody just comes up to you and goes, oh, you should write a book, and next thing you know, there's a deal. So that's just not even fair. But anyway, so one of the things about you having had the opportunity to have so many roles in the entertainment industry to give you this broad perspective, one of the other things about you is you always have been really generous about providing information and support for folks just wanting to get in the industry. And so, so as it relates to your book, which is, if you could talk about who's the book for, and what do you hope that people learn from it?
Well, I originally thought the book was for the emerging artists, and I still think it's primarily for the emerging artists. It's for people who want to get into Hollywood, but who don't always have insight into how to do it and how to do it effectively. There's a lot of protocol that goes on in Hollywood that people don't let the outsiders know about, and I think my goal was to break down the barriers. My parents, I grew up in Beverly Hills, but my parents were dentists. They were in the dental field. They were not connected in any way, and I had to find my way in. And once I got in, I realized that every single job that I've ever had has been a hookup from a friend. And so knowing how important your network is critical. But that's something that people sort of talk about in general. They go, well, it's not what you know, it's who you know, but they don't really tell you the specifics about why that is and how do you create that network. So I wanted to make sure that we sort of open the doors to everyone who wants to be in, because we need more material. We need great perspectives. I'm tired of seeing the same movie done 50,000 times. So I would love it if more people came in. There's just going to be better churn and more interesting content coming out. I thought that's, my book was really for anybody sort of on the entry level. What I found when I started to send it out to people to get either their blurbs or, their feedback, I found that everybody came back and they went, oh, I didn't know that. And so Jay Roach did my foreword, and his foreword is just so lovely because it's like, if he'd had the book, he wouldn't have made some mistakes in his early career. And I just thought, well, that's so wonderful. Yvette Lee Bowser said the same thing. So I feel like it really is for everybody. And I think the primary message of this book too is that we are not the executives. Let me just say executives, because I do wear two hats. Executives aren't the enemy. We don't try to be terrible. We don't try to give bad notes. We don't try to be to derail projects. We come to entertainment just the same way that everybody else does, which is we love content. We watch those movies just like everybody else did. We were excited by television. We are, rabid fans of literature, and we read every script, and we're sort of, we're in the trenches with you. We're just on a different side. And I'm sure that not everybody feels that way, because sometimes when you're getting a note, you kind of feel, I don't know, you feel attacked, but it's not on purpose. So it's trying to demystify the executive ranks, to try to give some insight into what we do and how we do and why we do it, but also just to give everyone the cheat sheet about, this is how to make your career a little bit easier. This is how to maybe go from 0 to 60 a little bit faster, a little bit farther.
So sticking with that part of your journey and how to avoid the mistakes, or how to leverage your networks. So what is the toughest lesson that you learned in your career, and that is in the book?
Well, I would say not to take things too personally. That was the toughest lesson, because everything feels personal. When you don't get a project bought, or you don't get the meeting, or someone cancels lunch on you 15 times, it feels like a personal affront. And what I try to explain in the book is that it's not personal. Executives are moving really, really fast. We're moving at a clip. I would get upwards of 200 plus emails a day. That's just emails. That's not including calls. It's not including texts. It's not including the material that I have to read just to keep up with the workload. So if you think about the fact that an executive they probably have about 30 meetings a week, give or take, or they're meeting 30 people a week. Some of those people that they knew before, some of these people they're having lunch with, there's a whole, it runs the gamut of the kinds of interactions that they're going to have every week. Plus it's an inbox, and it's a phone sheet, and then they're trying to have a life after work, which almost never happens. You're always working on the weekends. We just don't necessarily have time to respond to everything, or to tell you when we loved your script or we hated your script, or if we sent your script on to somebody else that we think is going to do something for your career. There were tons of times where people would send me something and I would just pass it along. And I would go, you know what, this person needs to know X person. Let me just pass along that material. And eventually something either would happen or wouldn't. But because I didn't have the time to then go back to you and say, this is what I did, it feels like I didn't do anything. So it's trying to not take that silence, that deathly silence, too personally, because the industry does work on a number of levels. It's working on the actual, what you see, what you feel, what you hear, but then there's an undercurrent of you're being talked about. people are moving your material forward. They're sharing it. And so there's multiple things happening. You just don't always know it. And it feels personal when you don't hear back. And I had to take that and really internalize that and realize that, oh, maybe I should have followed up with them more often because I would have had a better relationship with X, Y, or Z person. But because I felt like it was an affront to me because they weren't calling me back when I thought they should call me back, I probably let those relationships go. Does that make
Well,
sense?
that could be applicable for almost any field that you're in. Learning that careful balance of learning not to take things too personal, but
Right.
but there's got to be balance because and my next question is asking you about how to get to that perfect script, which you described as something that is very personal. So can you talk a
Right.
little bit about that, how to get to that one idea that sets you apart, that is your personal experience, and then the balance of not trying to take this whole, process that you're going through personally.
Right. It can make you insane, right? Um, so I worked all through my career, obviously with very skilled and very junior people, and um, working at HBO when we would bring in, our new crop of writers. Um, it didn't matter if they had just rolled out of college or if they had been, batting around the system for a while. We actually had a couple of folks who did just roll out of college or who were in college when they got in. Um, so it doesn't have anything to do with sort of age or and sometimes not even skill. Sometimes skill is sort of a secondary. What we were always looking for though was how personal is this material to you? And I'm going to go really deep because I feel this is important for people to understand. Um, One of the big mistakes that I find when people are writing material and sending it in is that they get really enamored of concept and not of character. When you get caught up in concept, your ideas seem very surfacey. They don't really grab us. They might be cool, they might be twisty, they might be fun and exciting. It might be Die Hard on a whatever, but really what we come back for, what we want to see on the page is who you are and what you're bringing authentically to this material. And the more I say you can bleed on the page, the more that character is you, the more those situations are of you and about you, the more it will pop and resonate for us, particularly when you're emerging into the field. Now, you can always write something where it takes place on a spaceship or under the ocean, and those are things that you won't necessarily have experienced. So in the write what you know, you can't be literal about write what you know. However, you could still write that big breakthrough script that might have that sort of setting, so long as the character is really experiencing something really emotional. Now, how do you get there? That's the key. The key is that you have to dig deep with your art. So I can tell when I write a script, I can tell if I'm not connecting with it. And then I always look at, well, how do I find something in that character that I can really relate to? And then write about that. So I try to emotionally, I do this deep dive on, well, how do I intersect with that character? So I'll give you an example. I wrote a script that I did. It was my one of my thesis scripts for Emerson, and it's a high concept idea. It's essentially Atomic Blonde meets Bridesmaids. So it's a badass government operative who's on the run, who ends up sort of hiding out in her sister's wedding, and she's terrible at personal relationships, and so she's now being asked to be a bridesmaid and participate in girly events and to have friends and to reconnect with her sister she's been estranged from for years. And I've never been a CIA operative. I did consult with one, but I've never been in that situation. I watched every Bond movie, every Bourne movie, every Taken. So I love that genre. And I always kept coming back to, those people must be psychopaths because they behave in a way that's not normal. And yet we're expected to believe that they actually have normal relationships. And what I did was I then took that relationship of the two sisters at the center And I said, well, this is actually a chance for me to do a do-over with my sister who passed away before my daughter was born. I never had the chance to reconcile with my sister. And so I put every ounce of emotion and relationship and all the things that I wanted to say to her in that script between those two sisters. That script has gotten me so far. I've gotten ridiculous feature meetings with people that I would never have expected, because they come back to that relationship. Yes, there's, people getting killed on the top of it, but they come back for the relationship. And there's an authenticity to that relationship that they are drawn to. And you can do it, a writer can do it, anybody can do it, but they have to really dig deep into the messiness of life and the messiness of your personal baggage. So I think that's the thing that's really important. When at HBO, we never really looked at structure, because structure can be taught. What can't be taught is all of the juicy goodness that's inside of your body that's screaming to get out. So if you feel really strongly about something, put that into your character. If you have a relationship that you want to delve into, put that into your character, and then make that character operate out of that want, that need. That's how you should proceed, not looking at the plot points. That help?
Oh, that was,
Hopefully
thank
that
you
helped.
for going deep on that. That was phenomenal. And I think the reason why Michelle might have asked me to have this conversation with you is because I'm a recent author that wrote my own first book, Warrior Rising, which is about my son and who has a disability. And it's about the journey that we've been on raising him. And to your exact point, I remember turning in my first manuscript, and my editor at Penguin just sent it right back and went, oh, no, girl, you got to go deep, and gave me extended time. And so while writing it, there were moments where I'm crying, and I really, relived the experiences and wrote from my heart. And that made all the difference in the world. So I totally, appreciate that process. But since I've been through that process, and I know the editing part is really part that's most challenging, to making decisions about what stays in and what goes to the cutting room floor. So thinking about your own book, so tell us what chapters hit the cutting room floor for you that you're put in your next book.
Yeah, I had to make some hard decisions because the title is The Executive Chair. It's from the executive point of view. There is probably another whole book on the things that I left out, which is, crafting really great log lines, which I find people sometimes have a really hard time with because they want to summarize the book as opposed to, no, you're supposed to sell the book. I left out chapters on drama and comedy that I had written, delving into developing specifically the drama and developing the comedy pitches in particular, but also in the scripts. And I kind of felt like I left some of those things out because they weren't necessarily from the executive point of view. They were more from the writer point of view. And I wanted to stay primarily on task, even though I do delve into your mission statement and to stay in your lane. So I do delve into some things, but it's really how it impacts your conversation with an executive. So I do think there are probably more things that we can get into in the future. I think I also didn't get into how to get into a program, which I think is a whole other chapter. There are tips and tricks on how to get into programs and why programs are important and how they became important. I didn't get into diversity, which I think I did have chapters on that. And so I think those are all things that over time too, if I don't write a book, I will post on my website. I'm going to post I'm writing a novel now, so I'm going to post that process because I think that's interesting, just to sort of get into the headspace of, creating content in different ways.
So we have so much more to look forward to from you. I'm excited about that.
I hope so.
So I remember back to 2013 when we were at the Hollywood Creative Forum, and I remember you talking to the room about all those aspiring creatives, you talked to them about our power. And you talked about how our Black stories, about our Black experience create jobs in the industry. And you talked about how our stories can create wealth. So, and I love that conversation, thinking about, how much, especially in this moment, how many stories we have to tell that have not been told yet, and the casting. And well, I'll let you kind of talk about what it means in terms of getting our stories out into the audiences that are hungry for these.
Well, I think this is like a multi-pronged. I think we only have a couple of minutes, but it's a multi-pronged conversation. I think I might have talked to you about the fact that, people of color need to be supported better by the industry. The one thing that I've been sort of standing on a soapbox for, and I wrote this piece recently about it, which is the fact that when you look at the number of overall deals that a person of color, or the percentage of overall deals for people of color versus their white counterparts, they are minuscule. And yet those overall deals go to supporting not only a staff, but also the ability to develop multiple projects at a time. When you are one person, a solo person, you only have one show that you can do at a time. You only have so many pitches that you can take out at a time. When you have an overall deal that's got plenty of money behind it, you can build a staff and then go and generate more IP. When you create your own IP, it's generating income for the rest of your life. So you sell that piece of IP, that book or that script or whatever, that's going to then generate IP, generate income for you every time that show is shown, every time that character gets spun off into something new, every time you write a song for a show that you have created, or you write a song for a show that is on the air, it gives you ASCAP royalties. You have the ability to just sort of expand your income. And I do think that we need to make sure that we are getting in those rooms and pitching and getting those show opportunities, getting those films made, because that is how you're going to create some generational wealth within this industry. If you think about Stephen King wrote books, and then he sold all those books, and they become TV series, and they become film series, and then those characters branch off and become other things, and he's still making money off of everything that he's done before right now, which is incredible. We want that for our people. We want to be able to do that. Sometimes, though, it is not as easy to go to the head of the class. You can't always go from, hey, I want to write something and then I'm selling it. Sometimes you go in through the writer's room, you work your way up, you become that showrunner that then can sell that show. You're not giving away your percentage of something to someone else who's going to manage you. So sometimes getting in through that doorway is important, but you can also do it by writing your book and writing a graphic novel. You can make your own web series, look at Issa Rae. So you can build your wealth, but you need to create that material. So I say, when you writers are out there and you're trying to figure out what you're going to do for your weekend, instead of going out and playing basketball or playing cards or going to see you got to see movies. So I'm going to say, go see a movie. But you need to be writing constantly. And I get up at 4:00 in the morning and I write for 4 hours before the rest of the house wakes up. And that's how I've been able to go to school, had a full-time job, eventually got into Sundance, now have a deal, because I'm constantly working my craft. And I think that separates those who make it and move forward and those who want to move forward but don't necessarily cross the finish line. So keep going. That's my big mission, is to make sure that people keep going.
And to make sure that they buy your book, right?
And buy my book. Keep going and buy my book. It will give you insights. It will cut to the chase. There are great, I think, tips in there. I have a chapter on getting in, a chapter on getting your first job, a chapter on why we do lunch, a chapter on a whole piece on your mission statement and staying in your lane, and why we need you to be in a lane in the beginning. There's all of that information is wrapped up in this book. Even tips and tricks about what we need to see in your pitch, and your pilot story. So all of that is all the information that I've culled from 35 years in the industry, from writer's assistant through all of that. I'm putting in this book for you.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us this morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are in the diaspora. And now, back to Dana.
Thank you. Thank you so much, MaryAnne, Kelly. That was a great conversation. I was taking copious notes. I'm like, character over concept. Get to the point. Stay in your lane. I'm over here. I'm ready. I'm ready to get that book. For those of you out there who are also hoping to get your fingers on the book a little bit early, we have a special update for you. Kelly's book, The Executive Chair, A Writer's Guide to TV Series Development, will be published in October. And we have 250 copies that we'll be giving away at random to those of you who are registered for this event. So make sure that you tell your friends to register too, and don't miss tomorrow because, I mean, we have a lot of fabulous things. So keep your eyes peeled for that email to see if you're one of those individuals that gets that book.
We all have a story to tell. Beautiful, complex, fascinating stories. Told through a lens of varying shades and experiences. That's the power of art imitating life. It cannot be defined or confined to one space. So let your creativity soar. Fill the page, press record, and dare to captivate the masses with your authentic voice. We all have a story to tell. What's yours?